Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new video. I'm going to be talking about the trip that Macron has made to China, why he made it, and why China gave him a grand welcome with a military salute and things like that. So you must be thinking, what the hell is going on here? So I'm going to explain it all to you. But without further ado, I want to kind of talk about some other issues that's happening around the world as well. So a secret NATO war plan has been leaked um, in Twitter, and it's also been leaked in Telegram as well. And this shows potential counterattack against Russian forces. And what's really important about this report, it tells you exactly what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And the other thing it tells you is the exact numbers of deaths in Russian military compared to the deaths in the Ukrainian military. So you got to understand that this report was made some time last year, I believe. So it's not a recent report. This has been made, sometime in 2022. And at that point, it says in this report that Ukrainians had almost 100,000 deaths, while Russia around 17 to 18,000 deaths. And obviously, this makes a huge difference to the deaths that they've been talking about recently in all the news, and everybody's saying Russia's losing, Russia's got more deaths than Ukraine. So obviously, this has brought out huge amounts of shock around the world. The Pentagon is saying that this is all fake news released by Russia, and this is all fake. However, if it's so fake, why are they scrambling around trying to delete it from the internet? I mean, look at this. Officials say they are struggling to scrub the sensitive material from the internet. So if it's so fake, why are you going to extreme lengths to, delete it? Because that shows exactly how guilty you are. And we'll see what happens with this counterattack. Personally, I think that Ukraine has got nothing left to counterattack with. There's less and less countries around the world willing to help Ukraine. They are losing ammunition, they are losing military tanks and armored personnel carriers, missiles, HIMARS. Every single day they are losing, men, and I just don't think they have anything left for a counterattack against the Russians. Uh, if this report is true, the Russians are taking in much less damage in terms of lives, in terms of damage to the equipment compared to the Ukrainians. And and if this report was created last year, imagine the death toll compared to this year, especially in Bakhmut. Bakhmut, the Ukrainians dying about 1,000 a day. I mean, I'm reading reports from Telegram. This is huge numbers. Not just deaths killed in action, but also injured as well and taken as prisoners and stuff like that. So 1,000 a day are being taken off the battlefield. Plus, you can't imagine amount of ammunition that they're going through because it's war. There's less and less countries willing to help Ukraine now. This now you got Zelensky going around the world begging, and he's getting less and less stuff that he did compared to before. It's got so bad that he has got an IMF loan for around 16 billion or something like that. And when somebody gets an IMF loan, that means things are really bad. That means this is the last resort. You've basically exhausted all of your options, and you've got no other choice but to get an IMF loan. And this is the kind of resort that the Ukrainians are taking now. Obviously, the Americans are still giving the money, the EU is still trying to give them money, but it's becoming less and less, and it's not enough to basically carry on with their war machine. So, this secret NATO war plan, we'll see what happens with it, but there was a offensive promised ever since last September. Nothing came. And since then, Ukraine has been losing more and more people, more and more equipment. So I just don't see it, to be honest. I don't see where this offensive is going to come from. And unless NATO troops get involved, unless Polish troops get involved in this offensive, and that's going to escalate things a lot further. I just don't see it. So I'm going to talk about the main part of the show now, which is Macron's trip to China. So obviously Macron went to China, and this time he took his mom with him, and I'm talking about Ursula von der Crazy. Obviously, he took her with him, just so she can keep an eye on him, just so she can keep him in check, and she is the eyes and ears of the United States. I mean, she is doing everything she can for the United States and destroying the European Union in that process. She is what you call a perfect Trojan horse. You know, she is fighting for America's interests and American rights and sacrificing the EU people in the same process. And I just found this hilarious where they have to sit um, in a triangle, I mean, in a circular seat in a triangular format, and look how far away they are from each other. And it's so funny. And do you remember when Joseph Borrell said Europeans are like the garden and the rest of the world is like a jungle? Well, guess what? They are sitting in front of a garden here, a Chinese garden. And I just wonder if that was done on purpose or something like that. Um, Also, Macron went Macron went to see Putin, and look how far away he was from Putin as well. So obviously, that was quite funny. So this is in contrast to compared to what happens when Xi Jinping meets Putin. Obviously, look at how close they are. They are sitting right next to each other. When Macron arrived in China, he got an absolute rock star welcome, and you can see him on his final day. He's been absolutely mobbed by people. Look how happy he is. He's been absolutely mobbed. He went to visit a university. He went to also visit some business areas as well in Guangdong, I believe. And he also had tea with President Xi on his final day. So he's obviously been given a rock star welcome. And even on his first day, he was given a military salute. However, this is stark contrast to Ursula. Ursula wasn't even greeted at the airport, by the way. She was not even, nobody even knew she arrived in China or when she arrived in China. Her arrival in China was so low key, nobody picked her up, and not even journalists were there to basically see her. So when Macron arrived, obviously there was a greeting party welcoming him, and he got basically king's welcome and a rock star welcome in China. The West is not very happy. The West is not happy at all, and you can see by some of the articles here. You can see here by the Daily Mail. Did France did France's little Napoleon really believe he could reign in Moscow's blood-soaked ally? Macron's trip to China was almost as embarrassing as his efforts to stop Putin invading Ukraine, writes Jonathan Miller. And see how Jonathan Miller is written in capitals. So let's go into the Sun. What did the Sun say? The goal of China. Emmanuel Macron stands with Xi Jinping in Beijing as is branded a puppet of the Asian nation. It's branded a puppet. It's funny how he's branded a puppet of China, but everybody in the world thinks he's a puppet of Biden because every time you see him, hugging Biden, and then he goes to meet Zelensky as well. So everyone thinks he's a puppet of the West, and now everyone thinks he's a puppet of China. So it's quite funny. He can't really win. And the Daily Telegraph basically says Macron has humiliated himself and the EU. So much for Western unity. The French president's trip to China shows he's learnt nothing from Ukraine. So you can see the Westerners are not very happy with his trip. And even people are burning his favorite restaurant in France as well. So he's not really a popular guy at the moment. People in France hate him, absolutely burning the city in Paris. People in the West hate him for going to China. And basically, rest of the world hates him for being an absolute puppet as well. So this guy cannot even win. So I want to kind of take my focus off Macron for a bit and go to Ursula. And Ursula basically went to Beijing just to give Beijing a laundry list of items, talking about human rights, blah, 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 talking about everything that Biden wanted her to say. She said, I mean, this woman is an absolute puppet and looks like she's going to be the next leader of NATO as well. Every time you fail in your job, you obviously get promoted, and this is what's happening to her. And I want to show you some of her tweets she put on her Twitter. She met some business leaders in China, and can I remind you that France took over 50 businesses to China to kind of sign some deals. I'm going to go over some of those deals with you in a bit. And she met up with some of those businesses, and she also met up with the European Chamber, who actually are in China already, setting up businesses there. So she says, China is a crucial trade partner, but the EU businesses face many discriminatory hurdles. European companies have so much to offer China, but they need a level playing field to invest and provide their goods and services. So let me remind this young lady that there is an agreement waiting to be ratified by the EU, which provides, you know, a level playing field between EU and China, and she's refused to sign it. It's been sitting in the closet for over 3 years. And this agreement would have given China and EU a level playing field. It would have meant that European companies can go to China. They don't need to do these joint ventures and things like that. And that was a huge, huge deal. And China gave so many concessions for that deal. And EU has basically spat on that deal because Biden and the Americans did not want this deal to go ahead, because that would have meant that European businesses would invest in China more and invest in US less. So US has basically told her, do not sign this deal, and this is exactly what she's done. And then she's got the gall to basically say that European businesses want a level playing field. I mean, the gall of this lady, and I'm not the only one who's saying this. You just have to look at her Twitter, and you can see some of these replies, and you can see some people are saying, then ratify the trade deal. Then if you have been intentionally putting on hold for 3 years. Look at this guy, Bandy. Level playing field, like what China has faced for the past 150 years until today. Sit down, Missy. And this guy says, just ratify the CAI. This is the investment trade deal. It's called the CAI. Just ratify it and many problems will be solved. You see, first step, withdrawal of sanctions against MEP. Expecting level play field, while in EU you continue to sanction and ban products and companies from China. Hypocrisy, full of nonsense, is saying. Next one. Full of nonsense. China's business environment is probably the fairest and friendliest. If the EU wants to do business in China, it should be polite and not so arrogant, which I completely agree. Poor EU companies, they can't get what they need, so they can just leave. Come to China, meet with other Europeans. Nobody's discriminating against you or the EU. They're just making sure you understand the trade, which is fairness. This person says absolute nonsense. EU has pretty much done nothing to offer China. China stole Russian cheap energy away from EU, and together Russian energy commodities is now outperforming the collective West. Maybe get some begging tips from Zelensky. That's a good one. Laughing out loud, EU member asking for level playing field after they participated in sanctions against countries and did nothing to the EU is rich. So you can see every single comment here, every single comment, and every single comment is basically, not one is positive for her. You can see here, this one saying, stop banning Huawei, then talk about level playing field. This person says delusional. And this person said, look, just ratify the China-EU trade agreement. You already have a negotiated clear path, but it means disobeying Uncle Sam, which which does not want it to be ratified, just show some independence and do it. So you can see everyone in these comments is basically giving her the truth. Does she even read her Twitter? I don't think she does. And not one person is basically supporting her. She is literally getting absolutely ass handed to her. Absolutely. And the funny thing is, I want to show you this video as well. And I'll probably show you in a bit. But you guys can watch it on Twitter or like YouTube. I wanted to kind of show you it, but I think there's a problem with sound. I won't be able to. But it's just basically another blah, blah, blah. Human rights, blah, blah, blah. Ukraine, blah, blah, blah. You need to call Zelensky, blah, blah, blah. You need to tell Putin to stop this war, blah, blah, blah. Basically, everything that Biden wanted her to say, she says. And it's just ridiculous. It's the same thing. It's the same record. When you play the same record over and over again, this is exactly Ursula playing from the same record. And then you got Macron sitting next to her and just nodding his head like a fool. I mean, this guy Macron, I'm going to go into him in a bit, and I'll tell you what I think of him. But before I kind of go back to Macron, I want to show you some of the deals, European deals that's been done. So I'm going to talk about the main reason why Macron was given a king's welcome in China. And obviously, I'm going to come to that very, very shortly. But just to give you an insight of some of the deals that's been signed. And I just want to remind you that these deals are French companies going into China and investing in China. This is the foreign direct investment, the FDI, going into China, which means they're going to spend money in China, build up China's economy, pay taxes in China, and also obviously in return they get access to the Chinese market. So it's a win-win for both. French companies make money. China also makes money as well with tax receipts and investment going into that country. So they both win. And these are some of the projects that's been signed. You can see here one of the biggest deals was a new assembly line for Airbus to make more planes, which was obviously expected. But you can see there's been deals agreed with transport. The thing about transport is there are going to be a lot more Chinese EV cars going into France, and that's going to be a huge deal. Energy. Um, on the energy side, you can see EDF has signed a deal with China to build more nuclear power plants, which China needs. Agriculture. On the agricultural side, water waste management company Suez has won a contract for seawater desalination project. And as you know, China needs a lot of fresh water, especially in the north. So they're going to be building quite a few desalination projects around the north of China to provide fresh water for its community. And also other things that's been signed, culture and science, and also the French makeup company L'Oreal is going to be going into China as well. They've signed a 3-year partnership deal. So these are some of the major projects that's been signed, but I'm going to talk about the secret projects that nobody really talks about. There's a very much a secret project going on. Couple of secret projects nobody talks about. One of them is the main reason why Macron has been given a king's welcome. The main reason, and there's no other reason for it. And this project is absolutely huge. And the project is basically this one. Um, it's basically producing a subsea internet cable to rival the US-backed project. So the history of this was HMN Tech was supposed to build the world's underground internet cable, which goes all the way from China into France, and it's going to pass the Middle East, past Pakistan, past Bangladesh, past Africa. So it's basically another internet cable providing fast access and links to these countries. It's an internet cable, and also provides many great benefits. For example, you can have data centers in China, so you don't need to have data centers in France. You can have them in China, and then you can have fast access to those data centers via these sea cables. And that's just one of the many benefits. But the major benefit is, the US doesn't control these underground cables, which means they control the internet. And one day the US might decide to cut off the internet off China, cut it off from the rest of the world, because that's what they do, right? With sanctions. So China does not want to be isolated in the future, so China is building its own internet cable. So this was supposed to be built by a Chinese firm called H&M Tech. However, the US basically placed sanctions on H&M Tech about 2 years ago in 2021, and they lost the contract because of it. And two other companies, Chinese companies, were supposed to partner with this, like China Telecom and another Chinese telecom firm was supposed to partner with this company and build these underwater sea cables. However, the contract was eventually given to a US company. So the other two telecom companies pulled out because of it, because H&M Tech was pulled out of this project. So the other Chinese companies pulled out. So guess what? Chinese companies are the best in infrastructure. So if anybody can build this, it's the Chinese. So they decided to come together and build their own. And this is why they need France's help, because this cable is going to go all the way directly to France from China. And this is the reason why they gave Macron a king's welcome, because they need his approval and they need his agreement to get this signed. And once he signs this, and which I believe he has already, they can start working on it. And I believe this is going to complete by 2025, which is 10 years before schedule of the American version of this cable. And the problem with the American version of this cable is they're going to have to buy these underground cables. They're going to have to buy the raw materials from China anyway. So China's going to say, no, I'm not. We're not going to sell you all these raw materials. We're basically going to be we're needing it to build our own one. So I don't even think the American one is going to finish by the time the Chinese one finishes. So they've already lost the race already. When you come against an infrastructure project against the Chinese, you're just going to lose, because Chinese are so far ahead when it comes to infrastructure. I mean, you just have to look at the high-speed rail network compared to United States. So this was a huge fail in terms of United States, and this is why they need France's help regarding this project. And the other reason they gave France a king's welcome is because because China still needs France's help. They need they need somebody in Europe to basically bat for the Chinese. They need somebody in Europe to basically counter all the lies and everything going on uh, against China at the moment. So they look at Macron and they think he's probably the best bet to put China in a good light, and to stop like sanctions against China and things like that in the future. Because if you look at all the other European leaders, you look at Ursula, look at everyone else. Everyone's like puppets, right? Apart from Orban, everyone's a bunch of puppets. So China needs a friend in the EU. So this is why they basically courted Macron. And Macron needs China because his economy is going down the pan. So he needs China's help to help build up France's economy. And China needs Macron's help to basically stand up to the West. However, I don't think personally Macron is strong enough to stand up to the West. And you can see him like going and meeting Zelensky. You can see the way he's buddy to Biden. And he's what you call a two-faced snake. And I think China knows this. China is not stupid. They know that Macron is a two-faced snake. However, by giving him a king's welcome, they're doing it for the French people. They're doing it to show France that China is a good friend, an ally of the French people. They respect the French people, and this is the kind of welcome they are giving to anyone coming from France. So this is not something they're doing for Macron. They are doing it for France. They're showing the kind of respect and to French people that they deserve. And so this goes a long way. And some of the French papers are really like praising China because of it, and you know, you got to look at the long term benefits of China doing something like this. I mean, personally, I don't think Macron's going to last long, but China is doing this for France, and the next leader that comes along will obviously look at that and think, you know what, China is a good friend of us. We're going to go to China, and we're going to try and do some deals with each other. And also, you have to remember, France is the other only European country that hasn't kicked out Huawei. You obviously remember Britain kicking out Huawei, and also Germany is also kicking out Huawei as well. Borrell um, has, I mean, Baerbock has told the press that, you know, she's looking at kicking out Huawei, so that might be happening soon. So the French are the only friends that China has left in the EU, to be honest, apart from Hungary. So they need France's help. So they did this for the people of France, not just for Macron. So there was another deal that has been signed as well. There's been a deal that's been signed for French helicopters to be sent to China as well. This has been kept under wraps. Not many people know about this. And yeah, you can see these helicopters. They're pretty slick. They look really good. And these are one of the deals that's been signed. Airbus helicopters and China's GDAT signed for 50 H160 helicopters. So they look like pretty cool helicopters. I'm sure they'll be very, very useful for China. And also they'll be some of the latest tech. The only stupid thing that Macron has said in his trip is basically said, ask Xi to bring Russia to its senses. I mean, what a stupid comment to make. First of all, anybody that's got an understanding of geopolitics or know how the world works will not say something as stupid as this. Anybody who's not a puppet of the state or got a bit of common sense would not say this. I mean, I feel sorry for Macron. I mean, this is probably the weakest French president I have ever seen. And I've grown up watching some great French presidents. Obviously, you know, I was a kid when Jacques Chirac was basically saying no to the Americans when he came to the Iraq War, and I heard some great things about the previous French president who threatened to walk out of NATO, and he was a really, you know, strong president back then as well. Even Sarkozy was better than this guy. So I feel sorry for him that he's probably the weakest French president that France has ever had. However, you know, he doesn't seem to have much common sense or much brains. For him to say, ask Xi to bring Russia to his senses, what senses? I mean, this guy is providing weapons to Ukraine. You know, is basically putting nuclear weapons on Russians' borders. He's expanding NATO to Russians' borders. I mean, when it comes to saying something like bring Russia to his senses, what about bring Biden to his senses? What about bring Zelensky to his senses? I mean, it's obviously a very stupid thing to say, but you know, you gotta give it to Macron. He does seem like he doesn't seem like he's got that much brains in his head at the moment, and he's basically the most hated man in the world right now. So I'm going to give him a pass. You know, obviously his actions, what he does from today, we'll kind of see how he does. Obviously, if he turns around and starts talking shit about China and starts banning Chinese goods and products, then obviously this guy is an absolute snake. But if he kind of turns around and starts, you know, standing up for China and standing up for the EU, in the face of Ursula and Biden, and then yeah, you gotta kind of give it to him. But this guy is very weak. I don't really see it. If there was any other stronger president than Macron, then I would have seen it. If that was Jacques Chirac in his place, he would have put Ursula in her place. He would have put Biden in his place. But I don't see Macron doing the same. So there's been a bit of bad news. All of this was happening while you had you have this lady, Taiwan, going all the way to the US to meet Kevin McCarthy, who is the number 3 guy in the US administration, who's the House Speaker, and basically she met up with him, and she basically said this was like happening during transit. However, the Chinese do not see it that way. It's just a sneaky way of basically pushing for Taiwanese separatists to basically follow separatism. So this was happening at the same time Macron was there, while Ursula was there. So you know that basically you cannot negotiate with the Chinese while all of this is happening at the back. So when you have Ursula talking to the Chinese, talking about human rights, talking about this, talking about that, giving a huge laundry basket of items to the Chinese, the Chinese don't give a rat's ass what she says. You have this young lady flying all the way across the world, meeting with U.S. House speakers and things like that. So this is a major red line for China. This is what they really, really care about. And I don't know if this was done on purpose to basically undermine Macron's trip to China. So basically, it coincided with that trip. Maybe, maybe not. But either way, this basically overshadowed whatever was happening with Macron or Ursula. And if Ursula thought that she can get some concessions out of China while all of this was happening, then she is absolutely deluded. But at the end of the day, she knows she's not going to get anything from the Chinese. She just went there for the photo op. She just went there to basically talk down on the Chinese, talk down on President Xi, and to basically show herself as the perfect puppet of NATO, perfect puppet of Biden. And obviously, she posted that clip of basically talking down onto the Chinese on her Twitter. So she believes her job is done. She doesn't need to get anything from the Chinese. The fact that she talked down on them in going to China, yeah, that's her job done basically, and that's what she wanted. She also needed to keep an eye on Macron, and Macron taking her is like taking your mum to a disco, or taking your mum to an interview, or taking your mum to a fight, or basically, you got to fight your own battles, right? In life, you can't take your mum every time with you. You can't take your mum to buy your shopping for you, to buy your clothes for you. You need to stand up as a man and do your own thing. And this is why, Macron is a very weak guy. He should have gone to China by himself. He should have distanced himself away from Ursula. And in return, he would have got even more concessions from China. But, he had to take his mom with him. And she tried to keep an eye on Macron for the first 2 days. However, on the last day, there's pictures of Macron going to Guangdong, also like meeting President Xi, having a tea with him as well. So they obviously been talking bilaterally without Ursula being there. So obviously Macron would probably be talking the truth, while he would be in shackles when Ursula was around. So that's the story, guys. Let me know what you guys think, and see you guys in the next video. Take care for now.